Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here for our monthly Project Management Society meeting. I'm Lisa Crimes, and we've got several people here from the board sort of scattered here, and we've got Lawrence, Jason, Kevin in the back, Scott's here somewhere. So I think we've got quite a few of us from the board, but we just want to thank you again for being here. Remind you that we do have one more meeting this month, which will be November 10th, same time, same location. So we're going to be back here. And then please make sure you're checking the website. And if you're on our LinkedIn group, there's lots of details out there. But you'll start to see our next year's events put together, hopefully by early December, end of November. We are expecting to have those. So we do want to thank our sponsors. I don't think we have anybody here representing our sponsors, but we do want to thank them. And then I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence, who is actually going to be moderating our panel. We appreciate our panelists being here, and I'm going to let Lawrence kick off our session today.
All right, great. Hey, everybody. Sorry I missed the mingling. Atlanta traffic for you. So hopefully someone's working on that. It seems like every event someone's got an idea to fix our Atlanta traffic. So how many people here has tried Agile in their organization? Okay. Now, how many people are on the product side of the business? Okay. How many are on the engineering side of the business? All right. Good. It's going to be a fair fight. So. I've worked with Rick, and I know Andy through the community, and Derek, right? Sorry. And so I'm going to ask you guys to give a short introduction, if you don't mind, to the audience. And we'll get into some questions around how Agile is changing product management and how y'all can think about it in your business. And then we're going to take some questions from the audience as well. I've got some kind of pepper things and get things going. But Rick, if you could start out briefly tell them about the background. And I had the pleasure of working with Rick on my first Agile project.
Well, it's nice of you to call that a pleasure. It was. Yeah. Hi, I'm Rick McMichael. I draw some comfort that I'm probably the oldest person on the panel this morning. I come from the engineering side of the house, right? I've come up as a software developer, a lot of time in software architecture, architecting high-volume OLTP transaction processing systems. I've been at Fiserv, which was formerly CheckFree, so some of you in the Atlanta area may have been familiar with CheckFree. We were acquired by Fiserv a couple of years ago. Nope. Long live Fiserv. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I've been there since 1995, the first year as a blood-sucking consultant. And then for some reason they chose to hire me, and I've been there ever since. And I'll ride that pony as long as they'll let me. For the past several years, I've had a group called Strategic Architecture and Technology for one of the four major groups inside of Fiserv. So we provide architects and architecture, governance, technology standards into our product development organizations. I've been involved in Agile since about 2001. That was about the same time that Kent Beck put the little Embracing Change book out. And at that time, we were building a product incubator called Applied Research and Technology. We no longer call that Applied Research and Technology because the acronym Fiserv Applied Research and Technology has some problems associated with it. Okay, that was funnier than that. Yeah, you need more coffee. At any rate, at that time, we were looking for a methodology because we knew to move quickly. We needed to act differently than the way we've acted in the past. And that was the same time that XP was coming on the scene. So we embraced extreme programming as the discipline for that. That started out with a group of about 10 people working actually literally in a locked room, open cubes, and trying to follow those practices as much as possible. Over the next decade, we've had to learn how do you scale that up to larger and larger organizations and start meeting the needs of programs as opposed to individual projects.
Good morning, everyone. Andy Powell, and I work at version 1. Hopefully most of you are familiar with this. We want you all to be. We're headquartered in Atlanta, and we provide Agile project management, software, and services. So we help people make Agile easier. I'm actually been at version 1 for 4 years. My background before version 1 is just a custom software development background. Been a developer, done some testing, done kind of project management in that realm. And then when I joined version 1, I joined in their product management group. And as we started growing the company, I moved over, and now I'm in more of a sales-oriented, customer-facing role. And if you think about the pragmatic marketing, product management, I handle all the activities and own all the activities related to sales support, and then get involved in the other strategic side and providing feedback into the actual product roadmap, those sorts of things. So hopefully today I can show you a little bit about how version 1 approaches Agile software development, because we're definitely doing it and building a product that supports it for different types of products and sizes of organizations. And I also end up talking with a lot of people who are going through that process. So since our product supports, tracking projects, I end up in a lot of conversations with people in your type of roles. So I look forward to sharing some of those insights with you today.
I'm Garrett Soom, and I apologize in advance. Rick and I actually have a very similar background. We both come from the engineering side of the house, so don't hold that against us. I started well over 20 years ago, and from an Agile standpoint, back at a small company called Equifax. I'm sure you've all heard of it. They like to monitor you, and pretty much they're like the great Satan, as people have told me. It's not really that bad. They're more, they can barely keep track of all their data because there's so much data. But back in the early 2000s, I was head of the internet architecture for Equifax, and what was interesting and very fortunate for myself is I had the opportunity both at Equifax and then later on at Silverpop to grow very small organizations to very large organizations, and from a ground-up standpoint, implement Agile. And believe me, 10 years ago, just like Rick, we started XP and pair programming and kind of the early stages of Agile, and we didn't know what we were doing. And there was a lot of missteps, a lot of things that I wish I had done differently, but I've learned a lot over the last 10 years. So what was interesting is we had to take organizations that had to scale from ultimately a very small team, which Agile is very easy. With a team of one, Agile is very easy, super easy, right? Because you can test your own thing and you can iterate very quickly. But if you scale that to an organization of, say, 100, it's a very different animal. So after Equifax, I grew the consumer products division. I moved on to a company called Silverpop. And Jason Brett, who is also at Silverpop, we built the organization there. And we ended up having 10 Agile teams. So it was very interesting, and we actually work with version 1. So they've been a partner of ours for a long time. And I'm currently not with Silverpop, but I spent the last 4.5 years there building the organization. So that's what I've been doing.
All right, thanks everyone. So let me say I'm with Ray Simi, the CEO of a software company here in Atlanta, and so I'm on the product side. So with Andy, maybe we'll balance it out here. And I think the benefit of this, based on other presentations that we host for TAG, is now we've got your customers up here if you think downstream. I know I was product manager for 7 years, and Rick was one of my customers to make sure that when I delivered something to engineering, it could get built and get built rapidly. So I want to kind of start back to the panel here and go to, as the companies were embracing Agile, there were some strategic objectives. Can you tell us what the stated strategic objectives are, and did you meet them? How quickly did you meet them? What was the realization in the process? And then, obviously, Andy, with your background with lots of different companies, maybe you could, and all of these questions kind of reach the span of your customers and reach and kind of give a feedback for all of them. One of you all could start out with strategic objectives. And did you achieve them, and what was the surprise?
I'll start with that. So from our standpoint, we were a very high growth, quick growth company. And the bottom line, our strategic objective was to grow our capacity in a way that for the money we were spending for development, return value to the business and do that in a quick way and make that work. So that was something that over time, it took a lot of iterations to actually make that happen, but I believe we succeeded in that. And the secondary objective was delivering on a schedule that was easily defined, so basically schedule-driven development instead of feature-driven development, to allow a rhythm to the business so they knew how to plan for when releases were actually going to the customers.
So I'll answer that question in sort of two ways, Lawrence. If you look back at when we originally embraced Agile, the problem that we were trying to solve then is that at the time the CEO had a company of about 3,000 people, and they'd come up with some new harebrained idea for a product to try out in the marketplace, and they'd look out around these 3,000 people, and they couldn't ask anybody to do anything because they're already running the organization at 110% of capacity, right? So the solution at that time was to pull out a product incubator. We needed an agile process. We couldn't use the same sort of waterfall techniques that were being used across the larger organization. That would have been death. So we chose Agile at that time to give us the ability to fail fast, the ability to experiment with products, even production products. These were not just internal experiments. These were actually external consumer-facing products. To be able to deploy those quickly. So really getting the agility and the flexibility out of Agile and the ability to fail fast. Over time, that changed. As we started taking the Agile concepts and people that had participated in that and had seen the value, and I think that's probably a good point, is that once somebody has experienced this in it and they've actually seen it work, in other words, they've been in a healthy Agile environment, they will never be satisfied with anything else again. Right? And what happened is those people moved out into the diaspora of a larger corporation into traditional product development, and they started taking those concepts with them, and I was one of those people. So we started going out and using Agile in more traditional contexts. And the goal then was to be a more productive and efficient product delivery organization. Basically to any large company, how many people here work with a company of 5,000 or more? Okay, so the larger the company gets, the more geographically diverse it gets, and you start facing the problem of projects start slowing down because of all of the factors that are involved there. And so everybody's asking you to deliver more for less cost, right? And so that's the current value that we get out of Agile is to deliver more product in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, just to augment what Rick said, the most common pattern you see is some group says, okay, we have enough freedom in how we develop the software to start producing in iterations, delivering in those short increments. And at some point then you have the organization seeing, usually they'll be successful, but not always, right? So if they have enough support and they are early adopters and they really want to do it, that's a key for that first pilot. They'll be successful, and then you from a product management standpoint, it's really easy to fall in line and start saying, okay, I'm going to have my requirements be independent of each other, right? Maybe in a user story format. There's a couple of small tweaks to how you actually present what you want the developers to deliver. And then at some point then you go from, okay, we had a successful pilot to understanding all the organizational impediments to doing that on a larger scale. And I think being able to identify what those are and then understanding what you can control and getting buy-in from the right people to broadly scale out what you're doing, that's really where you want to, as a product manager, invest your time, because you're kind of at the point where you have some insight into dev. Dev's probably going to move towards Agile more quickly than the rest of the organization because they actually see daily the impact. For the stakeholder group, they don't really understand or they don't have insight into the value that's provided by making that change. They're used to doing things the way they've always done them, and for good reason. So from a change management aspect, that's really where I think a lot of organizations get stretched. That's not something we do every day. Product management, always sees some element of that. And that's the area where you probably have to really do the most research. And that's a reason why a lot of organizations who are making the move to Agile, if they want to do it rapidly, will bring in a coach, someone from the outside. It's really the perfect time to use outside consulting because you're in an area where you're not, that's not a skill set. Changing an organization is not something that we tend to do every day.
And to add on to that, I would definitely agree from a third-party consulting standpoint. We would bring in consultants all the time. And it's interesting to see that because you get kind of that outside perspective looking at your organization, and no matter how good of a leader you are or how good you know whatever it is, getting someone else, the right person, to look at what you're doing and say, hey, have you really thought about this? And it's amazing and very refreshing that things can be tweaked. Even if you think about golf, when you go out and play golf and you think you're pretty good, and you take 3 or 4 lessons and they tweak just a few things, it's just amazing the difference that can make, and we really had a lot of success with that. And to touch on another point that Andy made, it's also that support from the organization. I've talked to a lot of companies around Atlanta at different events, things like this, and there's a lot of companies trying Agile, and they're trying it at the grassroots level, and they're not being successful. A lot of them just are not. And consistently, what it seems to be the problem is the executives of that company, they remain unnamed, but they don't get it. They don't support it. They don't have that broad, high-level support to do this and to do it right. And if it will not work unless they have that level of support. And it has to be at an executive level that has the ability to control and lead all parts of the development process, not just the product management piece of the pie. And once you get that, it's a very different animal. And we were lucky that, from the standpoint of Silverpop, that we had that. And because there's a lot of competing concerns across the spectrum to do Agile successfully, and to bring it all together is very, very hard. So
I'm glad you brought up the leadership thing, because I think all of us in this room are in a position for leadership. So that's something to keep in mind. And no matter where you're at, not only an executive role, I think that's an important aspect to it. I'll add, when Rick came to, I was in the big part of the business, not the safe shop where he kind of tested it out and had the biggest project going on at the time. And Rick said, and Van Williams, his partner, said, hey, we want to go Agile on your product. And I was like, oh, my God. And I stepped back and I said, it's a best practice, and it's a speed cycle. Anything that adopts speed into the business, I've always been a proponent for. And I said, go for it. But it changed my role for the whole, at least year and a half, to being an Agile leader. And so I think, take that away, it was very prescriptive and beneficial to our team and our company for adopting Agile on that big project. So let's keep the coaching going. I think that when you look at Agile, it says, hey, faster product in the market, and you're going to get great feedback from your customers. And, I'd like to personally call BS on that a little bit from my own experience. Yeah, it's faster cycles, but where the BS factor for me is do you really get it out in the market as fast and get that real feedback like the book says? Hey, I got a product to test, call up the customer, can you try this out and tell me what you like or don't like about it? And I think there's some truth that needs to be brought out about that from an engineering perspective. And I wish you guys could also kind of change hats and put a product hat or a business hat on and also kind of speak to it from that perspective. Because you all talked about change management from an organizational standpoint, but what are the shortfalls of that? And then maybe your areas how to work around that, how to kind of see around the corner, see that it's coming, and avoid those issues.
I'm happy to see
it.
So I guess first, anytime, my favorite way to talk about if you're trying to sell Agile software to an organization, I think the speed to market actually is a fallacy to some extent, especially because that you're asking an organization to change how they do things. That's going to slow you down initially. Okay, so that's just everyone knows that. So if you're saying you're going to get faster right away, they're saying, okay, you're crazy, right? So the better message is predictability, right? The best way to mitigate risk on a project is to deliver something that works. And that's really the strongest message that you can't really refute. I mean, we're going to show you the software in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. okay, because you can see it and you can get feedback, that is the way Agile in most cases handles risk. And it's probably the best way to talk about what you're trying to do for the business. We're trying to give you information sooner that's concrete to make better decisions, right? That's really what you will see right away. And so that's an important element to think about in terms of the rollout and how to talk about it. So that's something that I think Ron Jeffries spends a lot of time talking about. He's got a good video online that I think is the best way to make a case for Agile software development. Nothing the business is doing is changing. They still want all the features on a certain date, right? What you want to be able to do is tell them where you are and allow them to adjust their scope, their resources, and the time they're going to deliver it. Make those good decisions earlier and not be surprised later.
It's a tough question. I think that Agile actually can accelerate the pace at which you can deliver product to market. But there are many factors associated with that. Sometimes the market can't accept features at a rapid pace. Right? Some of our mainstream products, some of which may have 2,000 FIs that are financial institutions associated with them. You can't put out a new product every month because that customer base can't assimilate a new product every month. So there are times where you might, if you're fully operating on the disciplines in a high here, and I'm sure these guys will back this up, that Agile is a discipline. Effort. It requires governance. It requires constant attention to make sure that the disciplines are being followed, because it's like a spring. When you stretch the spring, if you're not continually stretching on it, it will try to return back to the way it used to be, to its steady state. So Agile is a discipline. It's not chaos. It's not an excuse to do what the developers thought they wanted to do in the first place. I'm sure none of you have heard that before. I will also echo something that one of the other panelists said earlier, which is I think what you're really trying to shoot for is a steady pace of high productivity, right? A predictable pace of high productivity, not the peaks and the valleys that other methodologies experience. And this can be very difficult for the business to sort of deal with, right? So reality always wins out. Usually you have a fixed amount of resources, normally. Usually the time frame is fixed. In fact, my personal recommendation is that you should be on a regular cadence of product delivery, right? X number of releases a year. So, and then you have the backlog of feature requests that product management needs to get into the product, right? Well, usually those are all necessary, all high value, must-have sorts of things. But there's the iron triangle. Reality wins out, and something has to give, right? Time's not going to give, and usually resources are fairly constrained. So then what's left? It's the feature mix that goes into the product. That can be really hard for an existing organization to get their head around. And part of that is the feast or famine symptom. What you may have experienced in the past is that, okay, release is going to take me 12 months. Man, if I don't get this feature in now, it may be 12 months. And in fact, depending on how you do portfolio prioritization, I may never get this feature, right? And so you tend to throw everything you can into the release, and then they get bigger, and they get riskier, and they take longer. And it's counterintuitive, because the final analysis, you end up getting less product to market than you would that if you were on shorter cycle releases, right? And now I'm working on the highest value things first, right? And knowing that when I hit that release boundary, it's not a finish line, right? I don't have to be afraid. The next day, you start working on the next release, right? You move into the next sprint or the next iteration, whatever terminology you're using. And so you get into doing that feature prioritization.
Definitely, to expand on that a little further, Agile and the rest of the organization aren't necessarily compatible with each other. And managing that there's an art and a science to it, because we found, just like Rick did, just because you can be agile and you can give product out quickly doesn't mean you should to the broader organization, because they can't handle the change, your customers can't necessarily handle the change. And how do you kind of make that balance work where you can have always releasable code and have something that is of quality yet is not in people's hands. And the challenge there that we found was, for example, a couple of years ago, we started rolling out a reporting framework monthly because we could. We had started that product from the ground up. It was agile. It was fully automated, tested, and it was of high quality and would go out every month. But even something as simple as reporting, the customers and training and support, they couldn't handle it as an organization. So we backed off on that, and the rhythm that we got to that was, to Rick's point, a 12-month cycle is just far too long. And we had gotten to roughly a quarterly cycle, so we would get the method we were at was a monthly sprint with iterations is kind of complex, but 3 sprints to get a release out, and that flexibility was good because we were still showing the business software continually. There was not there's always push about, oh, I need 3 more features, please get it in, but it wasn't as painful as a 12-month cycle because they knew at least a quarter away there was a chance to get those next few things in. So even though sales was selling things early and pushing for things, you could still get that rhythm going. And ultimately, the efficiency of the entire organization benefited from that because you weren't trading quality for time, for features, and making all those trade-offs. I take that back. No matter what, you're still making those trade-offs. It's just in a more process, disciplined, structured way, and it's you're still gonna make those calls at the end of the day.
Yeah. So one thing to add on, I think it's similar to what these guys have explained. So, little background on version 1. We've been releasing quarterly since I got there, so for 4 years. So we've been doing Agile for since the company started with a quarterly cadence. And I think that's a key thing, that the speed, right? You want to have smaller projects, like was mentioned, and then delivering more quickly. That's difficult for the whole organization, as was said. So for version 1, the places where I think it's difficult for the product management group, if you're kind of a dev focused, you actually have to do analysis, and with Agile, you're more pulled into kind of user experience, tactical, how should this button look type things. So you're stretched. I think of it, for us at the end of a release, I think we're having a little bit of struggle right now with the end of release is a very important time to be available to development and make sure you're making the right choices about the scope, right? Especially if you're doing that fixed cadence. You've got these important scope decisions where it's really rubber hitting the road kind of, is this a must-have or should-have kind of feature? And at the same time, you want to be preparing for the next release and doing your analysis, having the vision for your next set of features to roll out. So that's difficult for product management if you have a dev focus. And then on the other thing that we've seen that's pretty difficult is on the sales and marketing side, getting our mainstream marketing messaging ready and our sales messaging ready, and that's difficult for our product management group to really absorb that happening all at once. So the product team's done. They've got everything automated. It's ready to be released, and, let's release it. Okay, well, it takes a little bit of time so that we can demonstrate the features, that we know how to talk about it as a sales organization, to have the website updated. And so that tends to be really crunched. And so you have to be very efficient. You have to be communicating well in order to have that moving along and not have things slip out. So if maybe the quality of the software is very good, but the quality of your marketing messaging is junk, and that's something to watch for. So what is your acceptance criteria on releasing from a marketing and from a sales readiness perspective? That's a good thing to focus on because you're speeding everything up, and people are gonna have trouble keeping up with the dev team.
And if you ignore that, it'll fail.
And you'll frustrate engineering. So, I think you answered most of the question. I want to go back to one part because I didn't hear it explicitly. Are you getting customer feedback in the process? Because I think product management as champions for the Agile process and helping to carry the torch, so to speak, is, we've got this belief that we get to take the product to the market more often, and we get feedback from our customers, and then engineering hurries up and takes that feedback and
of the process, and that's all done in a 3-month process, and products come out and make money. Are they really going out in your organization and going to the customers and getting that feedback? Because in my organization, we're agile in engineering, but in product, what we're doing is we're taking the roadmap and cutting up ever smaller slices and saying, okay, do that in the next 3 months, do that in the next 3 months. And it's well vetted out with the marketplace, but once we hand it to engineering, it's cooking. And there really is no change without a change control. There is no real customers that have the time in this busy world to say, yeah, let me test out this beta product that may not even have a user interface and tell you what I think about it. So is the product managers representing your organization actually bringing customer feedback? And kind of talk to that real community, because I think everybody's interested in that part.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at it. In our current environment, we've got 24,000 employees and over 100 different business units organized into about 5 major operating groups within the company. So there's no one uniform product management practice at that point in time. I think actually there will be over a period of time as we elevate the maturity and methodology associated with that. But definitely not that way right now. So you can see that there are pockets of different ways of getting that customer feedback. Probably the most agile variant of that I've seen so far in the company is we have one group up in Canada developing an account processing system. And what they've done is they've reached out to some of their financial institutions and brought them in as members of the product development effort. So every iteration, they're actually bringing this panel of customers in, and they're showing them the results of the previous iteration of product development. And then they're getting their feedback, they're adopting that feedback, and they're using that to adjust their plans going forward. So I think that's a beautiful idea. That's kind of courageous, too, to take this thing. I know from a product standpoint, product management, often we're afraid to show the customer those intermediate results because it's not polished, and they may react negatively to something that doesn't, maybe it's mocked up. Maybe it didn't work well during the demonstration. There's a little bit of courage involved in doing that, courage and confidence, and they are doing that. And so we have some other practices around user experience testing, customer focus groups. So there are different ways that the actual customer is involved in evolving the requirements of the process, but there's no uniformity to it at this point in time, and in some cases not so much, and in some cases doing a pretty good job of it.
And really what we found was, at the end of the day, it comes down to people and process. If you don't have enough people to do it, and I'll back up. We rolled out Scrum, just basic vanilla Scrum, product owner, team. And over time that evolved, especially as we got much, much larger, because a product owner who's tactically involved in the team rolling out features has no time to really talk to customers and crystallize all the competing needs, because there's so many competing needs of requirements and the prioritization of that and to make that work. So what we found was that we actually went to a hybrid model where we had a product analyst, you could kind of call that the product owner, on a team, and product managers that oversaw 2 teams, and they had a much more strategic interest in the customers and what was coming up. And then even beyond that, we went to a director of product strategy that he had kind of the global view of that world. Because what you find is, Agile is great because it allows rapid iterations in a relatively decentralized state. But then you get in a situation where customers ask for something and one team may implement it, but it makes no sense in a holistic view of the entire product line. So getting all those pieces working together without it still becoming a big bureaucracy and waterfall, that's kind of the art of all that, and finding that balance so you can still get features out quickly, but you're not stuck in that's 12 months down the road type of thing. So it's interesting to watch that evolve, and time and time again, it always seemed to be a staffing thing to me. You need to have the right people in the right roles to help nurture that and push that along, so you're building, back to the original, you're giving the highest productivity and building the right thing for your customers and not building the wrong thing. Because I'd rather write no code than to write the wrong code.
Yeah, so at version 1, I would look at product feedback in kind of 2 buckets. One is, what should we do? And then the other one is, here we did it, what do you think of it? Right? And so for the what should we do, we spend a lot of time on. For the what do you think of it, we release the product, and they give us feedback. So we have about 1,000 customers, and so that makes some sense because we have a pretty diverse set of customers. So it's important for us to be building it for that 80% group. And from our perspective, doing kind of a beta testing would slow us down and not provide as much value as just getting it out there for most and then iterating on a feature. But from the kind of what should we do, are we heading in the right direction with our product? We've got 3 vehicles for that. We've got our sales group that's including people like myself who talk to people during the sales process and then do it during account management. We've got our services group who's on site, and so they actually get to see people using the product, normally in more of a training situation, so they get a good insight into what people stumble over as they're learning the product. And then the third one, which I think is becoming more popular, is we have an idea space product. So the idea management space, I was talking with Kelly from Ultimate Software before we sat down. They're using that as well. And idea management allows your customers to kind of put in their requests for what they'd like to see changed in the product, vote on it, comment on it. And so that becomes a way that the project management group can get mostly tactical insights into what the customers want in the product. And it's something that we found pretty valuable for us. And our product management team tends to use that as their primary kind of what people are saying. Then if we start to identify an important roadmap item, so it's coming up in the next couple of releases, then our project management team is going to reach out and selectively start doing interviews and really making sure we understand the user experience that our customers are looking for. So that's how we handle it.
I'd like to expand on a comment that Garrett made, because it's sort of maybe a little peripheral to the exact question that you asked, but I think it's important, and I'm here, I can say it. So you mentioned that you went to a model of sort of product analyst and product management, because you're having to balance the demands that Agile places on the customer, the customer, working with the delivery organization, versus the traditional product management role of aggregating information from the customer base, from the industry, and from your own internal research about where the product should go. And so there's a constant sort of duality there of having to work this way and then also to work this way. Agile demands direct involvement of the product owner in the project. And if you don't have that, then you won't be successful. So my experience with product management, so coming from the delivery side of the house, you guys can shoot me later and then don't ever ask me to come back again. But product managers, I've seen a continuum of some that work at a very sort of a high level. I'd like to establish this direction. Then I'll come back towards the end of the project, and then I'll look at it and say, no, I don't like that, I don't like that, and I don't like that. Right? And then you've got the other continuum, which is the obsessive compulsive product management, which knows exactly what they want, down to the color that they want that bitmap to be, and how big they want it to be, and exactly where it should be placed on the screen.
That's what we have.
Right. Agile demands more of the latter than it does the former, because it's important, because communication with the team and making rapid decisions at the last responsible moment are the secret sauce, part of the secret sauce that makes the thing work. If the product owner is the person that they have tasked to work with development, and development says, hey, where should this be placed? Or, what should the fee structure be for this particular thing? And if that person has to say, oh, let me go ask so-and-so, let me go talk to my boss because this has been delegated to me, then, you've taken part of the secret sauce away, right? Everything slows down at that point, and then you fall back on having to write stuff down and getting heavy-duty requirements documents. So got to have that detailed involvement. And go ahead.
are you seeing the balance? And I don't expect really you guys to have a good answer other than, hey, I'm the downstream customer. I need you to be involved in this way. And it's really up to us to figure it out upstream, is my opinion. But y'all take a shot at that, and then we're going to go to the audience and ask some questions.
Yeah, so quickly on that, what I've seen is that it is tough to have the strategic element and the tactical element. And I think the organizational structure changes based on size and all that. But if you could know from your organizational design who is mentoring the tactical person and what is their career path, then I think you're in a good space to be successful, right? So if you don't have someone who's helping the tactical person get better about making decisions, understanding trade-offs, understanding the domain, then you're not going to get high-quality product. And for them to know where they're headed, should they be focused on being more strategic thinkers? Do you want them to remain as a tactical role? Is that something the company can offer? Those are questions that you'd want to get figured out real quick so people know where they're going and really feel comfortable in their current role and can focus on the product and how to make it better.
And really, at the end of the day, for us, the product analyst who was functioning pretty much as a product owner on those teams, the best teams, those people really had a passion for the domain that the team was, because from a team standpoint, we typically kept the teams on the same product lines or feature set over time, so they got that expertise over time. Not always. We do some team shifting just because you don't want to get completely stovepiped with that. But you found that the best product analysts really, really, really loved the product and understood that part of the product, and they're making those decisions on the ground in concert with the product manager, as Jason said, because they're still working as one and they're very closely tied together, but they're still there for the team, so they're functioning as that agile business voice. So the engineers are not wondering, how should this work? And when you're back to the bitmap, and they're helping make those decisions so they can move quickly and make that interface. We found that really made things much more fluid from a development standpoint.
So I think acting as one team is really, really important. And as a product manager, you should expect the delivery organization, it's not an us and them thing, it should be an us thing, right? The product manager or product owner or product analyst, or kind of where we went was something we called a product delivery manager. They're one team with the delivery organization. It's not us and them, right? And they also have the right to demand more of the delivery organization. They cannot just be people that accept their requirement and they go off and code it, and that's okay. They need to be thinking in terms of what does the product need. They need to be thinking like business. Just like the process is pulling you into the delivery process, the delivery people need to act like business people as well. And then they start making good decisions on your behalf, and it takes some of the weight off of what you have to do.
All right, we got our first question. And I just want to kind of close out. I think that if you're in a role that where you're being asked to serve both roles, you need to do two things. Talk to your management and up the product management and business side and say, hey, we need to have a second role as described here. It's best practice. And then secondly, just from your matrix managing, look for who can you mentor and have into that product delivery role, whether it's creation of a new one like we did at Jeffrey now Fiserv. But I definitely think that's very important to do to be successful in big strategic projects, because I think the product management can be more strategic. So we had a question here.
So at version 1, I'd say that a couple of key things. One is that quality is first. I think if there's any kind of defect that's having an impact on the customers, there's no easy workaround. It's not just a superficial visual defect. That I think your best interest is to stop and fix those problems so you can move forward. So having a system that's continually causing you a lot of quality issues is a smell of something's wrong with your development. So the other side of maintenance could be more like inbound defects and customer support. Like how do you do second level support and triaging of those? And so we take a pattern of kind of sacrificing one person from the team that focuses on that. So our